Hey everyone, welcome to the Evangelist Nick Garrett channel. The first time I heard of the Cathars or Albigenses, it was from a Protestant apologist who pointed to the horrific actions against them by Rome. However, I found that the Cathars existed way earlier than the Middle Ages. They're mentioned by name in the canons of the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Further than that, they were greatly respected, and sometimes a Catholic priest would also be a Cathar. It appears that their level of education and piety were the benchmark for early priests. It gets even deeper than that. Be right back. As the end of the first decade of the 13th century approached, an old group of Christians called Cathars were living in a sparse but beautiful region of southern France called Albi. They went by the distinction at that time of Albigensians or Albigenses. The region in France where they grew over time maintained a wholly different religious view, holding to an old way as the Catholic Church began looking to some dramatically different practices and doctrines. This created tension in the church because Cathars made up a large percentage of the population and were known for the admirable nature of some of their practices. Still, around the late 12th and early 13th centuries, the independence of being a Cathar fell out of favor with Rome. They had become a bit too independent. At one point, Pope Leo even excommunicated several bishops who had either tolerated or become Cathars themselves. Back in the 1170s AD, the Lateran councils had taken on a more and more divisive and authoritarian tone toward the Albigenses, who had just continued to worship based on what they found to be spiritual truth. In hindsight, orthodoxy from the Catholic Church came and imposed doctrinal truth claims over how the Albigenses practiced Christianity, often well after the fact. Their refusal to submit to the will of Rome resulted in them being called heretics. The beliefs of the Albigensians were pretty unremarkable by today's standards. The idea of born-again experiences and sanctification were very foreign to Catholic Christians of that time period. Most threatening was the Cathar belief that the Catholic Church was a corrupted perversion of what Christ intended. They were accused of practicing a form of idolatry at best and straight-up Luciferianism at worst, an accusation that would continue to grow in time. The actions of the Church for the previous several hundred years had not helped to quell these rumors and feelings about what many viewed as an increasingly overbearing and corrupted Church. The belief in anything surrounding the Eucharist other than the new theology of transubstantiation became heresy. Refusal to participate is one thing that put the Cathars on Rome's radar. Today, the Cathars would most likely fall near conservative Lutheranism. On the surface, this does not seem like a good reason to burn and kill tens of thousands up to millions of good practicing Christians. Only there was no Reformation occurring in the early 13th century. The Church enjoyed the benefit of a powerful financial and military apparatus in what had become a perverted crusader spirit. Several other factors were interwoven in the issue of how the Albigensian community came to have their belief system and how it got so large. Their size, their growing popularity, and the fact that conversion by Catholic clergy to Albigensian faith increased to the point that it could no longer be ignored. This added to Rome's agitation regarding the sect, becoming well known during the time of Pope Innocent III for anything other than fundamental mainstream Catholicism could put any group of people identifying as Christians at risk. In modern times, and within only a few centuries of the Albigensian Crusade, revisionists sought to make their beliefs appear more Gnostic than they really were. This was done perhaps to soften the image of the Church to the observer who may wonder why it was so important for Rome to kill other Latin Christians as a means of policy, who just happened to identify slightly different practices. Geographically, the south of France was a crossroads of several different kingdoms, cultures, and many of the region's neighbors had conquest in their eyes, going back to the time that Charles Martel pushed the Moors out at the Battle of Tours. Moreover, the centralization of governments and borders in the rest of Western Europe had somehow escaped the Albigensian region, leaving them largely without direct centralized leadership. As far back as the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, the canons indicate the Cathars were thriving apart from Rome's attempts to create an authority structure. Cathars were regarded as educated, if not more educated, than the standard Catholic priest. The push to court them back into the fold of Catholicism had come in spurts over about 1,000 years, during which time they grew in knowledge, sanctification, and numbers. The canon of the Council of Nicaea specified a unique arrangement of integration and autonomy. Things had changed dramatically by the 13th century, however. Now the Fourth Crusade had just ended. The region where the first 3 Crusades took place had become a violent powder keg of Muslims, Turks, and now Mongol hordes fleeing east from Genghis Khan into the Islamic world where many of their own tribes had originated. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you next time when we continue our conversation about the Albigensian Crusade. Talk to you next time.